Hello, everybody. I know you're here within 3 seconds because that's how excited you are to be here. No, I'm joking, obviously. Obviously, we'll wait a little while before we get started, give people a chance to be here. If you are here already waiting patiently, then please do say hello in the comments. And obviously, if you have any questions, also say hello. Or ask those. Don't say hello. Just ask the questions throughout, and I will ask them. Katie might even just jump in and answer those without even needing me to ask them, which is probably even better because I don't have to read them, which then takes my distraction. Standard man, I can't do two things at once, but I prefer to listen, and then I'll try to read it at some point. Katie, hello.
Hi.
You right? You ready? Excited?
I'm always excited. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Ryan's here. Hello, Ryan. You love these. You're always here. I'm such a big fan. I love you. Yeah, we won't get started just yet. What's it? I've got 15 seconds before we get going. This should be fun.
Absolutely.
Proper topical topic. And we even get to swear in this one, and it's allowed because it's part of your business name.
Exactly. To be fair, though, I'll get into it. Some companies don't like it, but that's fine. We go with it.
Yeah, I know. I think I said to you before we got started. I was like, I'm not even sure if I'm going to use that word yet, just because I don't know. It just feels awkward saying that when there's potential kind of clients speaking, nothing else to do.
But you've also got to remember, clients are human.
Yeah.
So they probably hear it themselves. I'll tell you a funny story if we get to it about me using the word in a really corporate company that was like, get your act together. And I was like, no, I'm going to use the whole word.
Look at you, rebel. I'm too much. I'm too scared is probably the best term. Yeah, all right. Oh, look, we're 2 minutes in. Perfect. We're going. One last reminder: if you are here, say hello. If you have any questions, do pop them in the comments. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce myself. For anybody who doesn't know who I am the director and founder of Employees Health. Employees Health is a workplace wellbeing company. We help educate and support businesses in different areas of wellbeing, from helping them create their wellbeing strategy, to delivering health checks, to massage at work, to delivering education in those 4 pillars of wellbeing. Myself, I'm a high performance exec coach. I help individuals improve. The best way, and this is really kind of cheesy, is I help people achieve their personal and professional goals and unlock their potential. I don't remember how I say that, but yeah. Anyway, my brain fog. That's the boring bit done. Let's get over to the most important person here today, and that's Katie. Katie, say hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining. And thank you for making me swear on my podcast. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, we've got a wicked topic today. It's going to be all around burnout. And as a burnout coach and expert, the majority of this will be you talking to me, hopefully asking you some really good questions to explain more. But before we get started into that, can I just get you to introduce yourself? Tell us what you do. Yeah, let's do that.
Absolutely. So my name's Katie Maycock. I'm the founder of a business called Get Your Shit Together, which is pretty much the whole reason why I created it was because I personally burnt out and I wanted to make sure that no one else experienced that. So, earlier this year, I've been working in Get Your Shit Together, running Get Your Shit Together since 2018. And this year we also launched Gist, which is essentially just the cheeky version of Get Your Shit Together, but for corporate companies that don't like the word shit. So the sole purpose of both of these businesses is to work with individuals and organizations, helping them create a rock solid wellbeing foundation to make sure that they can rock up, whether that's at work or at home, as the best versions of themselves. Now, one of the biggest things that we really focus on is stress. Obviously, like we've talked about, we talk about burnout, but the precursor to burnout is stress. So that is one of our core areas. And so we work with organizations and individuals, helping them understand the impact that stress has on their physical, mental, and emotional well-being, how they can build a resilient mindset, because you know what? Stress is just a part of everyday life, but that doesn't mean we don't have to manage it. And then also looking at what companies can do and what individuals can do within companies when they're starting to see the signs of stress and burnout, and how to make sure that they are supporting themselves and their managers. That's essentially what I do.
Fantastic. And I look forward to getting into more detail in a bit. But before we get started, you mentioned it slightly earlier already. Can you kind of share your story? Because you have got a pretty cool story, a bit of a kind of a nomad in regards to where you've lived in loads of different locations, done loads of different things. So it'd be quite cool to hear that, but also your story of kind of how you went through burnout, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things that I always start off with is that I never had a great relationship with stress. Even when I was a little kid, like I never had a good relationship with stress. I always found really ineffective coping mechanisms to manage it. So it was kind of like, I'm stressed out, I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to allow future Katie to deal with that. So that was a really big piece. And we're talking about when I was, 15, the first time that stress really hijacked me was I ended up with an eating disorder, unfortunately, for 7 years. That was really difficult at the time because it was at a time where there was not a lot of resources and support for a lot of people like myself. And so I suffered with an eating disorder for 7 years, from the age of 15 to 22. Now, during that time, I decided, you know what, especially in my 20s when I went to university, I ended up doing a double degree in nutrition and physiology. And in my final year of university, I was still in the midst of an eating disorder. I was like, I'm going to launch a business while doing a double degree because, hey, why not? Because why wouldn't I put myself into that position? What ended up happening was during that, running that business kind of saved my life in a way, because it actually helped me realize, you know what, how could I possibly give really good nutrition advice to people if I'm not taking my own advice anyway? So I really struggled. I actually sought help quite early on, asking, can I get some support with my eating disorder? Unfortunately, because the way, and they still do it today, and it's just a bit of a nightmare. And just for the people out there, I don't know if you know this, but it's actually National Eating Disorder Awareness Week, so that's why I wanted to talk about it a bit more. One of the biggest dilemmas with eating disorders, because it has such a profound impact on the physical health, a lot of the times they will diagnose you on how severe your physical health is and not diagnose you on the mental health that you actually need. So even though I was extremely unwell, and even though I was at a really, really low weight, because I didn't fit into 100% of their physical requirements that you have to have for having an eating disorder to seek certain types of support, I didn't meet that. And they kind of just said, off you go, try and figure it out yourself. And I didn't have the traditional help like other people might have had from family members and things like that. So I suffered for a few more years. And then when I got into my 20s, I promise you I'm going to get this into burnout, I promise you. But in my 20s, I was running my business as a nutritionist, and, I really remember waking up one day and was like, I can't keep doing this to myself. Like, I'm literally killing myself for something that doesn't make sense. And if you've never suffered from an eating disorder, it's like having this intrusive thought that's extreme. It's yelling at you. It's telling you all these horrible things about yourself. And it's like negative mindset times 100. It's that bad because it prevents you from, eating. So I remember at that stage, that was one way I coped with my stress. And I know that sounds really bad, but it was one way that I did cope with it. So what happened after that, I overcame my eating disorder, and then ended up running my business for a few more years, ended up walking away from it, and then went into recruitment. Now, I developed some of the most unhealthy working habits during this stage. So I would work, anywhere between 12, 14, 16-hour days because, one, I actually really loved the job. But the other thing is as well, whenever my mind quietened, if I ever quietened down or I wasn't busy, it was like those intrusive thoughts were coming in. So I used it as a coping mechanism to sort of, diminish those sort of like anxiety voices, all the negative self-talk that I was having. And what ends up happening with that is that I created a foundation where I would overwork myself. It would take a massive physical toll on my body. It ended up taking a huge mental toll on my body and emotional toll on my body, on my mind. And I ended up creating these habits and behaviors that ended me in cyclical burnout because I never really dealt with the core reason why I had an eating disorder, which was I just didn't manage my stress well. That's my kind of but my background with an eating disorder. And so what ended up happening was in my mid-20s, I burnt out for the first time and I had no idea what was going on. It was like I woke up one day and it was like my body was absolutely in shambles. We're talking like I wasn't digesting food. I had swelling throughout my whole body. Like I'm saying, I remember waking up and my left hand was 3 times the size of itself and I couldn't make a fist for 6 weeks. I was having issues with my hips. I was having issues with my shoulders. I was having issues with my knees and ankles. All the sort of joints, they were getting really swollen and they were really red. I was really struggling with my mindset as well. So I'm actually very driven and I'm very goal orientated. But during that time, it was like I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. I remember going to meetings and I remember seeing people's mouths moving. I could hear the noises, but it's like I couldn't make it into anything meaningful. And the same thing with emails as well. And at that stage, my anxiety was through the roof. Like I was having panic attacks nearly every second day. It was so painful just trying to get to work. It would be like I would be exhausted by the time I got to work because of the anxiety. But when I burnt out, I was so to the point where I just didn't care anymore. And I never forget waking up in the morning. I'm like, I just can't do this. Like I physically, mentally, and emotionally just couldn't get myself out of bed. Like I physically just couldn't do it. And so that was the first time I burnt out. And I ended up having to leave the job that I was in for a few months. I ended up going back into the job after around 8 months, taking time off. I got back to my baseline, went back into the job and did the exact same thing again, but burnt out within 6 months. And so that was something that was really quite shocking to me. I didn't learn my lesson 100%. I knew that there was something wrong with me because I woke up with a cold sore across half my face and I looked like Sharon Baratheon from Game of Thrones. And I remember thinking to myself, going, I really need to get my shit together and I really need to make sure that I start managing my stress a bit more effectively. But I really was in this cyclical burnout. I really didn't know how to do it. And when I think about it, we're never really taught this is what stress is, this is how it feels, and this is what you can do about it. So I was still just fumbling through it. And then in my 30s, that was when I kind of like, I had to call it quits. I moved to Vancouver with my now fiance, and I was working in a sales role where I could work 12-hour days, I could work 18-hour days. So, and I had no qualms with that. Again, I had no qualms with doing that. But it was, again, taking a toll on my physical health. And I remember the day that I quit, I remember going on holidays and I said to my manager, I'm like, if you contact me over anything, because at this stage I'd worked for a year, barely taken any time off. I was working 18-hour days. And I remember saying to her, if you call me once while I go on my 8-day holiday, I'm going to hand in my resignation. Within 24 hours, she contacted me and I handed in my resignation. So that's a bit of my backstory.
I don't know where to start. Thank you. That's probably the first thing I should do. Thank you for sharing. And it does sound quite like a story and definitely a journey of self-discovery, understanding kind of your own kind of symptoms and understand stress in general. I completely agree with you. I don't think we ever really do it or did it. I think it's coming into schools. So some of the kids I teach and coach will kind of talk about, they do Wellbeing. So stress is something there which is educated now. But back when we were growing up, that wasn't something, right? And we were taught to hustle. We were taught to work hard. We were taught to
get over it,
grind and get over it, right? Mm-hmm. And I still think that's still there today in some industries and with some mindsets. I think it's, you can see how that negatively plays through us all. But sometimes it does take a journey and a story to really understand and grasp and reflect back on, actually, this is what this is. I see it in the health profession a lot, because normally people don't make change or didn't start seeing me as a personal trainer until it was too late. And it was like,
there's a problem.
Until there's a problem. And then they go, okay, look, had this health scare, we need to do something. I need to up my movement, reduce my weight, all these kind of things. Like, okay, let's do it. And it just takes that thing sometimes for it to happen. And sorry it happened to you, but it sounds like from that, you've now been able to learn and have a super great set of skills for yourself, also now to teach as well, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I remember when I was like really, really sick from, my second bout of burnout. And we're saying like, I felt like an old lady. Like I was walking up and down stairs. Like I just could barely walk up and down stairs because I was in so much pain. There was so much going on in my body at that time. And I remember thinking at that time, I knew stress was the number one killer, but I didn't really get it. I was like, oh, that's like an old person's problem. That's not a young person's problem. And that was a big reason why I didn't seek help. Even though I was having all these health issues, I really didn't see it how it could be stress, because I was like, I'm too young. It can't be a thing. Like, if you think about when they talked about stress, in the 50s, we're talking like men at 50 years old, 60 years old dying of a heart attack. We're not talking about a 25-year-old girl who can't get out of bed because of stress, right? We're not hearing those stories. And so it didn't click until I woke up looking like Shirin Barak. And I know that sounds really vain, but I will tell you this, waking up and seeing a ulcer across a quarter of your face, that's going to shock you into a realization like nothing else. So that was, it was at that, you get to a health crisis and you got to deal with it. I always say I'm really fortunate that I was so young when I got it, when I figured it out, because just imagine I kept on going. I don't know where I'd be right now if I didn't get my shit together, about 10 years ago. So I have no idea.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think stress is a really weird one. I think I went through university and I suffered from eczema. And when I'm stressed or when I get to those key points, this would flare up. Or my hands would dry up, my hands would crack up, my skin would get bad. And you're like, oh, it's just stress, right? Or you maybe even combine the two. But it's weird how that stress has a physical effect.
Yeah.
Through the mental, which I think's
that has to be taught more, and people need to get that. Like we kind of get it, but we don't. It's like we go, yeah, it can impact us physically, but then there's this whole like we kind of jump to the very end. We try to jump to like, oh yeah, it's an old person's issue. It's not a young person's issue. No. We're seeing huge increases in certain health issues that is all related to stress. And stress, if you don't manage your stress, it will lead to inflammation, and inflammation is what's going to cause all those health issues. So for instance, it was eczema with you. For me, I had gut health issues, I had joint issues. I was having all array of, other issues as well. I was just suffering from eczema. It's so annoying. But, we've got people that are getting diagnosed with fibromyalgia, like it's going out of fashion. You've got people with Crohn's disease. You're getting people with other autoimmune diseases. All of these are linked to stress. So we've got to understand it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is I think you hit the nail on the head, right? We look at it as an old person's issue, but the reason why it's an issue then is because it's been a long-term compounding factor issue.
Yeah.
And it's because they've not managed it well, or not even really even giving it time of day. I know so many high-performing individuals who just live through stress and then get to 50 and go, they've had this health scare, and you're like, well, like,
there was a whole journey before.
25 years worth of you putting yourself through stress to get to this position. Not only maybe you aren't looking after yourself very well, which also compounds that stress issue because you're working too much, putting too much pressure on yourself, blah 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 blah. I think it's such an interesting.
It is, but I'm seeing people younger and younger. So I typically work with the high performers, the high achievers, the type A professionals. I seem to attract those peeps. They're the hardest people to work with because they see stress as an ally.
Yeah.
So they see it as something that's going to drive them towards success. And there is a merit, there is an argument in that. Whereas, it can do, but you have to change the verbiage. It's pressure, it's not stress.
Yeah.
Because pressure at the end of the day will drive you forward. It will motivate you. It will help you focus. It will help you make decisions. It will boost your immunity. It does all these amazing things. But when you tip over into that stress point, that's when things sort of get a bit dicey. The dilemma with high achievers and high performers, what happens with them is they get to the success. They've typically tied their self-worth to that success, and there's a whole vast reasons why they've done it. And what they do is because when they're successful, they're getting rewarded for working with stress and making stress an ally, right? So actually helping them understand until shit gets real dicey, they're not going to listen to it. And they might have, really vague health issues. And I've worked with these people. Like I get people, at 35, 45, 50, and they've got these these vague health issues, and we have to work with them on it. And it's helping them understand, yes, there's that physical reaction with it, and understanding why that's important for them to manage early on.
Completely agree. And there's so many different things you can do to kind of help that. And I agree with you. Pressure is different to stress. Pressure is great. Stress, it's compounding, isn't it? So there's a few things which leads to that stress.
Yeah. Stress essentially is needed. But what we've done is in modern day society is we've normalized to the point that we've prolonged it. And so it's not necessarily stress that kills us. It's the fact that we've kept it as prolonged stress that kills us.
Yeah, 100%. Burnout.
Okay.
What does it mean to you?
So I go against the World Health Organization. I know. It's the one thing I disagree with them on. But if you look at the World Health Organization, so here's the thing. I've been talking about burnout for years. I launched Get Your Shit Together back in 2018. The World Health Organization came out in 2019 and said it was a diagnosable syndrome. And then what happened was COVID. So it really got a spotlight popped on it. Now, the World Health Organization, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially what they say is it's a physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. That's a phenomenon that happens in the workplace. Now, I do not know anybody that sits there and goes, oh, okay, I'm stressed from the workplace. That means I'm going to burn out. Oh, I'm stressed because I've got kids screaming at me all day. I'm going to have something else, right? Like it doesn't do that. Essentially, burnout will happen. It is, it's physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. And you have to hit those categories. It's going to hit you physically, it's going to hit you mentally, and it's going to hit you emotionally, right? And it is from that prolonged stress. But at the end of the day, we've got to look at where that stress is coming from. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the workplace, but for whatever reason, the World Health Organization has come out and said that it's only a phenomenon that happens in the workplace. The thing is, I know where they've gotten this from, because back in 1976, I think it was, there was a psychiatrist called Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, and he was doing a lot of work within organizations like corporate companies, and he was working with type A professionals, so the people that are highly driven, highly motivated, what we would consider the workaholics, high achievers, all that kind of stuff. And he was seeing this phenomenon with them going, these people, these young 40-year-old men, it was typically 40-year-old men, and there were some women in there. He was looking at them and going, you guys are suffering physically, your physical health is dropping, but you're also having this dip in mental capacity, so mental fortitude. So when we're talking about the mental health side with burnout and, mental exhaustion, we're looking more at the cognitive functioning here. So we're looking at the way you concentrate, the way you focus, the way you problem solve, all that kind of stuff. So he was like, your cognitive function is dipping here. You're more forgetful, you're not as focused, you're making more mistakes, and your performance is dipping. And then what he was seeing was that it was really impacting their emotional well-being. And so this is what we might look at as mental health now, which is they were more likely to have anxiety, depression, and kind of cycle between the two. They were really struggling with their ability to manage their emotions and things like that. And so he was looking at it from that point, and he was looking at it again just in the workplace, because that's where he was situated, right? So when I look at burnout, I don't look at it like that. I look at it as, it happens in the workplace, and we can talk about that. But we've also got to look at stress is just multifaceted, right? You get stress from the workplace, you get stress from relationships, you get stress from being a parent, you get stress because of the political nature, you get stress because of finances, right? So that's how I look at burnout. It essentially is just physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. Regardless of where that stress comes from, it's just stress.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I look back and go, and I always do this when people talk, is just I reflect and go, well, some of my most stressful times were coming from the things like my hockey. I used to get super stressed for underperforming or being anxious of performing, and it wasn't just, I mean, I never got to burnout because of it, but it was that is also stress. And if that's there consistently, then where is it going to end up?
Yeah.
And then if you've got other stuff going on as well, it's I use the word compounding factors consistently, but it is compounding factors from different areas.
Yeah.
If you add financial stress into that, and then I'm not achieving in my workplace and everything's all over the place there, then it can't just be from the workplace.
No, it can't just be from the workplace. And I think, there's so much that's going to go into it. I mean, like I said, it was only a diagnosable syndrome like 5 years ago, right? We're going to have so many more things that are going to come into it. I just hope we don't overcomplicate it, because that's always my fear when we do these types of things. It's like we try to overcomplicate it. And I just don't think, I think we should simplify the simple things and, make the complex things complex, but don't overcomplicate it in general, if that makes sense.
Do you feel like that's happening already a little bit though?
I think people are sick of hearing about it. I think people are like, oh, yeah, whatever. Like, every person's burnt out now. And here's the thing. Every person that's going to burn out is going to have a different experience. I find the people that I work with have probably gone past burnout a lot of the times, and they're kind of more leaning towards that nervous breakdown side. And then we're looking at sort of, really poor mental health kind of leading into maybe it triggering into mental illness at some point. Not everyone, obviously, because that can be genetic and all that kind of jazz. But I think there is an element where we do try to overcomplicate it, and we try to oversimplify. But it's really funny because we try to So look, my background is as a nutritionist, and I've always said this as a nutritionist. We make the simple things complex, and we make the complex things simple. And I think that's what we're doing with burnout. I think we're making something that's a very simple idea, making it more complicated, and making the very complex part of burnout very simplified. And it's not quite like that. Like, I mean, I remember when burnout became a thing, I jumped on LinkedIn and I saw this person who was so terrifying. He was educating founders, and he was like, I woke up today burnt out. And so what I did was I had the morning off, and then I went for like a 15-mile run in the afternoon, and now I'm able to work until midnight. And I'm like, in no shape or form, way or form, should you be talking about burnout, because that's not burnout. That's just a bit of fatigue, which is a symptom of burnout. But burnout's completely different. Like, you wouldn't be able to go for a 15-mile run. You wouldn't be able to stay up until midnight. You wouldn't be able to do all of these things because you would be rendered inactive because of anxiety, or you would have apathy. So you can cycle between the apathy and the anxiety piece there. Your physical health just wouldn't be there. And and mentally, you wouldn't be able to concentrate to be able to do that. So we can't look at it as just like, I woke up burnt out today and I overcame it. No, burnout can take months, if not years, to overcome. So yeah, simple answer, yes. But I went on a tangent.
Sorry, I'm multitasking. I told you I shouldn't do this, but I'm multitasking and reading all these comments come in. The first thing I'm going to say is nutritionists do make the simple things complicated. That's the first no, because
I don't know if it's nutritionists. I think it's marketing, and I think it's personal trainers, and I think it's people that don't understand the complexity of how the body actually works.
Yeah, there's too much information out there. But yeah, no, I'm just having a joke with you. I don't want to upset you too much.
No, it's not nutritionists. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are nutritionists out there that will do that, but at the end of the day,
yeah,
a lot of the things around nutrition is very simple, but some of the things that we become, when we start digging into, like, I don't know if you remember this, but there was I remember when I was sort of a nutritionist, there was this really big thing about blood typing nutrition. So you would eat a specific way for your blood type. And it's like,
yeah, you would also train a specific way. So I remember when I was working in the gym, a dude come in and said, this is a DNA thing. So we're going to take your blood and we will kind of give you a food plan for that. But we'll also create you a training program designed around your blood type. And I'm like,
why are you overcomplicating it? Why are you overcomplicating it? Like, that's sort of where, and then there was this, what was the other thing that we had? Do not get me started. I mean, I've guinea pig diets on myself just to go, what the heck is the deal with them? Do not get me started on a carnivore diet. That's the only one I refuse to ever do. But the keto diet, what are you doing? Like, why are you overcomplicating this?
Yeah. Although I do use the carnivore diet to argue against the vegans, just because why not?
I think the thing is as well, every diet's healthy if you do it properly. Like I was a vegan for 18 months just to try it out. Honestly, that was probably the most unhealthiest I felt. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work for somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And the most important part of all of this, and you'll know this, how are we going to nutrition anyway? I'm going to say it, and then we're going to move on. And you can add your bit if you need to. But the most important part around nutrition is that you are the correct weight. Because if you're the correct weight, all of your health markers are at the right point.
Yeah. I think it's also understanding weight isn't the dilemma that we've got to talk about with weight. It's not always an indicator of health always.
Yeah.
And also where we kind of lose it a little bit with like thermodynamics, and people are like, it's not energy in, energy out. We've got to understand hormones, and especially in women.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I think, you can get a perimenopausal woman or a menopausal woman who is eating so low calories, exercising every day, and they can't shift the weight, and that's all because of hormones, right? So we've got to put that into a context. And weight it's so hard as well. Like we've got to look at everything that goes into it. But essentially, if you are at a healthy weight, and you are doing healthy things like eating, exercising, eating the right foods, doing all of that, getting enough sleep, you're going to put yourself ahead of everybody else. But the biggest thing that's going to impact your health, regardless of your weight, is stress.
Good transition, smooth transition. Thank you very much. Okay, fantastic. How's this affecting the workplace?
So although I went on a big tangent, that's not the only thing that's happening in the workplace. At the end of the day, what a workplace is made up of? They're made up of people, right? And people are stressed. So there was a study that came out, and this is before COVID, and it was saying that 79% of the workforce was struggling with stress.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at last year, the beginning of last year, they were saying that 46% was 47%. It was 46 or 47% of the workforce were burnt out. They either had struggled, they either suffered from burnout or they were currently burnt out. That's 50% of the population, right? I'm going to say when those stats come out again, it's going to be worse this year. And that's the only people that are recognizing that they are stressed. There are a whole host of people that won't recognize they're stressed out, that they won't recognize that they've got the early stages of burnout, or in fact, if they are burnt out, right? So you've definitely got to look at that element. So the way it's impacting the workplace is costing them a huge amount of money. So every single person that's burnt out in your organization is costing, for every £10,000 of their salary, it's costing you £3,500 worth in income, right? So if you've got somebody that is on a 100K base, just do simple math for me, it's costing you £35,000 every year to manage that one person. That's how much, and that's because of a drop of productivity, it's presenteeism, absenteeism, mistakes that are made, obviously turnover rates, things like that. That's how much it's costing you. So if you've got 100 people in your organization, and they're saying, what are they saying? They're saying around 20%, it could be 46% of people in the workforce. I'm not saying every company's got that, but if you've got, let's just round it up, 50% of people, that's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
We're looking at 170K a year that you're losing, if not more.
Yeah, if not more. It's interesting.
No more.
Where did you get that stat from? Because the first time I've seen
that from the Gallup report.
Gallup. Yeah, fair.
That's the reason why I use it. I'll listen to Gallup, and I think there was also something from Deloitte that came out that sort of backed that up as well. Or maybe Deloitte was using Gallup. So usually when those two work together, I'm usually like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, trust that. No, yeah, okay. And it goes back to that point, right? Individuals are in a workplace.
Yeah.
And
here's the thing with workplaces, I think, so something that I try to educate people on, and I get a lot of hate on LinkedIn for it, is when I go to bat for companies. I truly believe, and maybe this is the optimist in me, I truly believe that companies do want to try and do the right thing, especially certain managers, right? They just don't know how to do the right thing because there's so much coming at them right now. It's like, build a mental health policy, make sure everyone can, manage their stress. Now, make sure that you're following the D&I stuff. And don't get me wrong, that's really important. But these companies who have been running for 50 years are trying to change the mindsets of people and it's just taking a bit of time. And the other thing is as well, I always say this about companies, your role as a company is to create an environment where people can take care of their mental health and take care of their stress, right? And making sure that you're not adding to it. And there's definitely different ways you can look at it, and you do have to get out of old school behaviors, right? Like I remember back in the day when I was working in corporate, it wasn't unusual for a manager or a client to call me at 10 o'clock at night, right? I was off. Like I could get emails at like 6 o'clock in the morning from my manager and expecting an answer within the next hour. Like these were the things that we had, and it was just normalized back then because that's when mobile phones became a thing. We could work from anywhere in the world, and we did. So we got to get out of those kind of mindsets and those routines. And I think a lot of people, a lot of countries, I just saw Australia are making it legal to work from home. And they're also putting in the 4-day, was it the 4-day work week? Oh no, they're making it illegal for your company to contact you outside of hours like France did. Was it France? Yeah. So, I mean, that's how it's impacting the workplace. So that's the first thing, right? It's money, it's morale, it's impacting productivity. But it's also just impacting the people around you. If you've got one burnt out person in a team, that's going to have a huge impact on every single person in that team as well. So it's impacting it quite significantly.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that first point of I don't think any manager or anybody is out there to negatively impact anybody. I don't think anybody's that mean. I think the majority of people are trying to do their best, but aren't being taught how to do that.
They don't have the resources, right? So
or the ability to reflect and understand what that should look like.
Yeah.
Or time, or even time to do that.
Yeah. If you look at managers right now, my prediction for 2024 with burnout is that we're going to see a huge influx of manager burnout and leader burnout. We already started seeing it, but we kind of brushed it under the rug because managers have got to take care of burnout. Burnout's a massive issue within the workplace. So managers, you've got to be on, make sure you know how to spot the signs of your people without actually giving them the resources so they don't burn out. And I will say this until I'm blue in the face. If you have a burnt out manager, you're going to have a very poor, toxic team because they won't be able to know how to manage it. And it's not their fault. They just won't have the resources to help manage that team through those types of turmoils. So you've also got to understand why managers are burning out. They've got a huge amount of pressure on them. If you think about any type of initiative that gets executed in a company, it's usually the leaders and the managers that have to actually execute that within their team. So for instance, you've got, the business strategy that's working against the wellbeing strategy sometimes. So you talked about how you create wellbeing strategies. That's amazing. But if it doesn't align with the business strategy, it's going to go out the window. So that's something, and then that's going to have a trickle-down effect of a lack of trust. There's going to be, changing ideas, going to be lack of transparency, all that kind of stuff, right? So you've got the manager who's trying to enforce the business strategy, which could be right now a lot of companies are really struggling to get money in. So they're putting higher pressure on their teams to make sure that they're hitting their targets, especially in sales teams and things like that. Or you've got people that are being let go at a higher rate, which is going to cause stress for the people that remained and for the people that have been let go. And you've got managers that are having to deal with that. You've got managers having to fire people on their team that they don't want to fire. That's going to take that's emotionally exhausting for them. It's stressful for them, right? So there's that. And then they've been told, okay, make sure you're hitting these targets. They've got to motivate their teams. And then then they've got a wellbeing strategy. You've got HR going like, oh, make sure your team doesn't burn out. And they don't have the resources. They're like, well, what am I meant to do with that?
Yeah. It's a minefield, isn't it? And I think this all leads back to, Ryan, you're on here, the conversation I had with Rob Stevenson. And we spoke about what's going to be the biggest thing this year. And it's going to be actually managers needing support, leaders needing support. And
glad I'm not the only one saying that.
No, do you know Rob Stevenson?
I know of Rob Stevenson. I feel like I've seen him around LinkedIn, but I don't know if we've ever had a conversation. And if we have, Rob, if you're randomly seeing this and we've had a conversation, I apologize.
Yeah, no. See, we had that conversation, and it was like, one of the big focus this year is going to have to be leaders because they are struggling both ends through with so many bits. And I think that's where I go back to your first point was I think they're not out there to harm anybody. They're just struggling themselves to manage it all.
The dilemma with that is if they're not self-aware of the damage that they're causing. Because if you think about stress, what happens? You go into survival mode, and when you're in survival mode, you can only really see yourself. You can't see past yourself, and so it lacks that self-awareness piece, right? And then it's just a really slippery slope. So
and also you get some people who don't, who are quite maybe potentially self-absorbed and focused on themselves, performing at their best and not bringing people along with them. So yeah, there's so many bits.
I think this podcast could go for hours if we want.
I'm just thinking the exact same thing. We haven't even covered half the questions there, but we're going to lead on to the next one.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I think we understand the importance. I think the biggest part there is that the ROI is just one. How is it affecting us? And if companies are losing that much money, it's crazy that. Do you know what's even more crazy on that point is that they're actually slimming their budgets. They're actually cutting costs. They're actually doing all those things rather than investing harder on their people.
Because they don't have the money to do it. That's the dilemma, right? So that's the biggest issue that we've got right now. And they are between a rock and a hard place, right? If they don't have the money to invest it, they don't have the money to invest it. You know, I always say to companies and to people that work for these companies is that no company wants to lose staff members. That's just crazy if you think that. Like, no company in their right mind want to have to fire staff. It's out of necessity, for various reasons. And we can look at it from a human point of view. They don't want to make people, jobless. And on the other side as well, it just means, that means their business is having to downsize, which business wants to downsize on intentionally? Do you know what I mean? So I think there's that to look at as well when it comes to where we're at right now and investments. If they don't have the money, they don't have the money.
Yeah, exactly. Agree. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to say thank you for everybody commenting. I am reading them, and you're making some really good points. I think, Katie, are you reading those as well?
I don't know how to read them. Is it over here?
Yeah, it should be.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, Ryan. I feel like I wanted to meet Ryan when we were at the book launch for the other Ryan Hopkins. He's just amazing. So I'm just going to give my mate Ryan Hopkins a bit of a shout out. But Ryan Briggs, I didn't get the chance to meet you. Yeah,
he's everywhere. But yeah, now you can see all these comments, so you can see why I'm getting distracted.
Yeah. So Cecile, what I'll do is I'll find it and I'll send it over into the links. The Gallup info.
Perfect. So let's get back to the topic at hand. How do we get our shit together and manage our stress and well-being so that we don't burn out?
Okay, so are we going to look at it from the individual standpoint? So what can individuals do?
We'll go individual start with, and then we'll look at organizations afterwards.
So that's one massive thing, right? So as an individual, we've really got to take the responsibility and accountability on ourselves. So what we do with Get Your Shit Together, we've got 3 specific pillars that we work on. And sometimes we work on them individually. Sometimes we work on them, in tangent because you have to, right? So the first pillar that we work on is building up that physical resilience. Stress has a profound impact on the body, like we've already mentioned, right? So it increases inflammation, it lowers our ability to digest food, it lowers our immunity, and it leads to a whole array of health issues. So what I always get people to do is, if you don't feel great, it's going to be way harder to manage your stress, right? If you physically don't feel great, going, hey, now I need you to manage your stress, you're going to be like, I'm good. Like, I don't want to do that. So the first pillar that we always look at is how we actually manage your sleep, diet, and exercise, and understanding what you need to do in each of those 3 categories to make sure that you are actually building yourself up physically, to make sure that you are mitigating the impact of stress. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that when we're talking about exercise, you're going to the gym for an hour at a time and throwing on heavy weights. No, that might actually just mean gently introducing exercise back into your routine. So that could be yoga, it could be going for a walk, depending on where you are, if you're burnt out. Like if you are 100% burnt out, you might just need to do some stretching, right? When it comes to dieting, starting to eat healthy food, starting to make sure that you're just getting some additional fruits and vegetables, complex carbohydrates, so really good fibrous foods, things like that are going to heal your gut, because I talk a lot about gut health. And then when it comes to sleep, which is the most important part, because I can promise you this, if you have not had a good night's sleep, it's going to be really difficult to eat healthy, and it's going to be really difficult to maintain your exercise. So we sort of look at fixing those areas. And do not get me wrong, I am so aware when people are stressed out, it is going to impact your sleep. So then that leads me on to the second part, which is building up those resilient mindsets. Now, some of the key areas that we look at when I'm working with individuals one-on-one is we're looking at what coping mechanisms they currently have for stress, and are they actually holding them back, or they're actually supporting them. Something that I've learned is that although we've never really been told how to manage stress, we kind of fumble through life, and we will create coping mechanisms. Now, they might be for instant gratification, right? So for instance, let's say you've got a to-do list the length of your arm. You might falling into procrastination, right? So you'll be like, I'm going to procrastinate on this because I don't have the capacity to deal with it, whatever it is, right? Which is going to keep you stressed out. It's going to actually prolong that stress because you're not dealing with problems. So that's the first thing that we do and then we start building up better habits, behaviors, and responses around stress. So that's what we do in that part, building up that resilience. And then the third part is helping you understand how to work effectively instead of throwing yourself into working yourself into the ground, actually finding a strategic way to work more effectively rather than absolutely killing yourself to try and get stuff done. So they're the three pillars that we look at, and they're the three things that people need to work on is, making sure that you're undoing bad habits when it comes to stress, making sure you're understanding effective coping mechanisms, building up that resilience, understanding when you're working well under pressure and when you're slipping into stress, right? These are all the things I deal with when it comes to my clients. A really big piece that we look at is belief systems. We have to break belief systems when it comes to stress.
No, sorry. Yeah. Yes to all of it. Do you know what? When you started with those three key behaviors, I was like, we're on the same level here. We're on the same track. I add one, but it's a mindset piece, which I think falls into your second pillar. Mm-hmm. But sleep, exercise, and nutrition, they're the key behaviors in life that we take for our health and well-being, right?
Yeah.
Which I think people don't put a priority on.
Well, they don't have time. If you're stressed, when do you have time to get a good night's sleep? When do you have time to cook a healthy meal? When do you have time to go exercise? You have to make that a priority.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think people don't make it as a priority. Like they don't care about it enough to understand the impact of what it can do for us.
I don't know if they don't care enough. I think I would sort of challenge it as people know it's important, but I think in their head, whatever the stresses they're dealing with is bigger than that. So they'll be like, once I deal with this stress, I will then start going to the gym. I'll start eating healthy. I'll start sleeping. But what they don't recognize is they've actually created a new set point and a new set of behaviors that whenever stress kicks in, it could be really loud or it could be just whispering at you. They're always going to choose that stress. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, I've got a deadline at work. Okay, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Rather than actually taking a step back, going, hang on a second. Is there a different way to look at this? Do I have to be completely reacting to stress? Is there a more proactive way to deal with it? I think that's something that's really important. And something that I do always talk about, and when I talk about the mindset piece, is here's the thing. I actually used to be a gut health specialist. When I was a nutritionist, that's what I did. And I can tell you this, it does not matter how healthy you eat. If you are stressed out and you are not digesting food properly, you are still going to have huge amounts of health issues if you do not manage your stress. That's why you have to make that a priority.
Yeah. Isn't there more and more research saying your gut's your second brain?
Yeah. So the gut-brain axis.
Yeah. That's a whole other topic. Look, come on. We've got 12 minutes. That's really fantastic information. Those three pillars are really cool. And that last pillar, I think, once you've organized your mindsets and your behaviors, then looking at how you work, it just makes sense, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
As much as I would love to continue on that, because I'd like to learn more, I'm actually going to explore that last pillar a little bit more. Can you explain some of those kind of key elements of what that looks like for people and how they're actually managing how they're working?
So I think it's got to be a dual approach with this one. So this is not one time where they have to work with their organization. And the biggest thing when it comes to that point is understanding how effectively you work. So for instance, I know for myself, I can work 18-hour days without batting an eyelid, but I won't realize that's bad until 3 months down the track. Because I'll do it for 3 months and then wake up and be like, that's not great because now I can't work for another 3 months. So it's understanding how effectively you work and what is the key areas that you need to work on. So some people, it could be doing like small sprints with a bit of a break, if that makes sense. So that's the first thing you've got to understand. The other thing that you've got to really work with is creating those really good boundaries and understanding how to actually enforce boundaries in the workforce. I think a lot of us, especially, I find this a lot with millennials, we'll just take on everything and we want to say yes to everything because it's kind of what we got taught to do. We kind of got taught, like, you know, to make sure that you can do this job, take on more work, prove yourself, you know, do the job that you really want rather than actually doing the job that you're actually paid for. Like, we're all taught these things and we take on all these things, but we don't recognize that we're already at our limits and we're already at capacity. So understanding your own limits, understanding your own capacity, and also being able to enforce those boundaries, but also understanding work smarter, not harder. And what I mean by that is actually looking at, it's a really good book and I'm going to absolutely butcher the name of it. It's by Stephen Covey and it's a really famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yes, I got it. He actually has a part in it. I love it when I remember things like that because I'm really bad at it. He's actually got something in there where he talks about the 4 quadrants. And he talks about quadrant 2, which is working on the things that are going to make the biggest impact, that way you're not having to work from a sense of urgency or a sense of or a place of stress. So it's really proactive work. And that's something that a lot of people in the workplace and managers need to get better at, is understanding what work can I do today that's going to make tomorrow just a little bit easier, rather than constantly be putting out spot fires, constantly be reacting towards work and constantly be working under that sense of urgency. Because I find when people do that, although it can be addictive for a lot of high performers, it is very addictive, it's not sustainable. And so understanding that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, you need to learn. Oh, sorry, I just saw Cecile. You need to say no, and no is a full sentence, right?
Yeah.
Also, when you're saying no, this is my philosophy. I teach all my clients this. When you say no to something, never offer an excuse on why you're saying no. Just say, no, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have somebody that's really effective at overcoming objections, they're going to guilt you into doing the thing that you said no to.
Good answer. My brain automatically goes, no, I probably need, and explain it, be empathetic to them and say, look, I need to explain why I can't do this because I just don't have it. Like, but then, as you said, if they're good at selling you as such, then they're going to overcome that.
Well, I think the thing is as well, because we feel guilty for saying no, so we've got to unlearn the guilt of saying no, because we don't want to disappoint people, right? Some of us have been conditioned to be complete people pleasers. So saying no to people and disappointing people is a huge fear for us. Mm-hmm. But learning that it's actually okay to say no and be okay with that, because if you genuinely can't do it, that's okay. That's okay. And you don't have to explain yourself. Sometimes it's like, hey, do you know what? I can't right now. I'm at capacity, and just full stop. And if anyone goes, oh, what are you doing? It's like, I'm really sorry. I can't talk about it. I'm at capacity. Just keep coming back to that, and don't go off a tangent on like, well, I'm doing Joe Blogg's work. I've got to do this. I've got to pick up the kids. I've got to do that. Because the minute someone finds something that they can overcome, they will do it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Time. I'm very wary of time. 2 questions left, so if we can squeeze this in the next 6 minutes, we've won. How then do we? I think you covered this a little bit in that last kind of section around how managers are supporting, how managers are managing. But how do organizations now support and get their stuff, their shit in order?
So they need to do an audit. They need to take a step back. There's stages to this. They need to take a step back. So I would be saying the leadership teams need to get together, take a step back, really understand where their culture realistically is and what are people actually saying in the workforce, rather than just glossing over it. So do a bit of an audit, get an understanding. You can do that with a pulse check. So, making sure people are, where people are actually at. Are people stressed out? Are they overworked? Are they overwhelmed? Get an understanding of your starting point. So have that self-awareness piece as an organization on where you're starting from. Second part would be to understand, how did that happen? How did we allow this to happen? What behaviors, what habits have we gotten into as an organization that's putting that pressure on the people there? And then come up with a really good actionable plan to execute. Now, don't try to do everything, right? Focus on one thing at a time. Do that one thing really, really well and resolve that, and then move to the next thing. But make sure you have an action plan. And when you're building this out, keep in mind your business strategy. If your business strategy is, you've got to hit all these targets, whatever, take a step back. Go, is that really realistic with where the workforce is right now? If you've got a workforce that's extremely burnt out and you've got these really aggressive targets you need to hit, and I get it, it's hard to balance it, especially if you've got investors and you've got outside pressure, right? I get that. But you've got to look at the reality of where your organization is. You're not going to hit those targets, and you're going to end up spending more money and losing money because you're having to hire more people.
Yeah, or you've just made redundancies and you've still got these mad targets where people can't commit to or retain.
Yeah, if you've done redundancies, that work of the people that you've made redundant it goes somewhere, it filters down somewhere.
Yeah, that's
so
good. Adding more work and your targets are still where they were. So yeah, just consistently go overwhelm people, put too many goals and pressures on them, and the list becomes too big, and then they lose focus, right? And
they lose focus, and companies, and that's where companies make the biggest mistakes, right? And it's a slippery slope, and you might not know the impact that you're going to have for another 5-10 years when you're having to declare bankruptcy or going to liquidation, right?
Yeah.
A lot of startups, that's what happens to them.
Yeah, I think it's really hard as well in that point, through redundancies especially. But I think I really like that last point about actually aligning your business strategy with your people and your wellbeing strategy as well. Right?
Well, where they're at, right? So many companies create a business strategy separately to their wellbeing strategy. Then they create a wellbeing strategy without really understanding where the people in the company are at. So it's like, what's the point? Like, you can give people gym memberships, but if you've got burnt out people, they're not going to use it. They're just going to look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah, you've got a bunch of people who don't care about going to the gym and do other things, and they're not going to
don't have time to. Like, what's the point? Let's say you've got a company, right? They're like, we've got these really aggressive targets. You're making these poor people work 10, 12-hour days. But yeah, here's a free gym membership. When are they going to go? They have a family. Yeah. They have a life. They're tired. They're exhausted. So, like, be realistic with what you're doing.
Yeah. A rant we will save ourselves from. Katie, thank you first off for joining me. I have one final question, and this question always stumps some people, always stumps everybody. But top 3 take-home bits of advice.
So for individuals out there, if you are feeling stressed and burnt out, if you don't know where to turn, focus on one small thing that you can do every single day that's going to make you feel a little bit better. If that means managing your stress, so looking at all the things that are stressing you out, and you can acknowledge that it's stressing you out, understand how it's stressing you out and where it's coming from, and understanding what you can do about it, action that thing. That's going to make a huge amount of impact on you. If you don't have the energy for that, focus on the little things you can do to fill up your cup. So that could be making sure you have a bit more rest, making sure that you are doing a small exercise, switching off you're switching off from work at an early time, all those kind of things. So that's number 1. I think I probably just gave you 3 there, but you're good. So that's the first thing. So take care of yourself. The second thing is make overcoming stress your number 1 priority, because it doesn't matter what's happening in your world. If you are stressed out, you are not going to be able to tackle challenges of life, because it's going to be really difficult for you to focus on it, understand those problems and what you can do about it. So that's the second thing. And third thing, I'm just going to throw this out there because we talked about it a little bit. Learn to say no without guilt, and learn to say no without offering excuses or reasons.
Fantastic. What a way to finish with 50 seconds left on the clock. Thank you. 3 fantastic kind of bits of advice, which I think throughout this, there's loads of different learning bits for people to take away and use and think about within either themselves or within their organization. I think we smashed it, if I'm honest with you. I mean, I say we, you smashed it. So thank you.
Well, I hope people got a little bit out of it.
Yeah, no.
Out of it.
Lots of people commenting and adding bits and kind of saying thank you. So yeah, thank you for everybody who joined. Got more comments. This recording will be on YouTube at some point within the next 7 days. I'm going to say that rather than 24 hours. The next podcast, I say podcast, LinkedIn Live, is next week with Alex, talking about tech in Wellbeing and how we manage that, how we navigate it. So please come and join that. Make sure you sign up to it so you don't miss any of the news. Once again, I'm going to say this again to you, Katie. Thank you. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all the fantastic bits of advice that you provided today.
You're so welcome. I was very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Anyway, everybody, have a lovely weekend, and we will see you all soon. Oh, if you want to reach out to Katie, find her on LinkedIn, drop her a line, tell her she's amazing. If you want to find out to me, obviously, just drop me a line. I can even reach out to you in the comments. But have a lovely day, a lovely weekend, and we'll speak to you soon. Katie, stay there. Just so you don't want to.